Imagine a single point of light in a place that has no light at all. Not a star. Stars are warm, stars are honest. Stars announce themselves across the dark and say, "Here I am, come find me." This is the opposite of a star. This is a small gray machine clamped to the back of a frozen rock, drifting in the gulf between two systems where nothing has reason to travel and nothing ever does. There is no sun here. There is no day, no night, no horizon, no weather. There is only the cold, which is absolute, and the silence, which is worse. And inside that small gray machine, sealed behind a door that will never open from the inside, there is one living thing. A human, 41 of their years old, marked on our records as Elias Mercer, prisoner, Category 9, sentence final. He has a bench to sit on and a recycler to drink from and a panel of dead controls he is not meant to be able to use. He has air for a very long time and food for longer than he will need it. We made certain of that. We always make certain of that. The cruelty was never in starving them. Now pull back. Pull back until that single gray point shrinks to nothing and keep pulling until you can see the whole of it, the network, our network, scattered across the dark places of the galaxy like seeds thrown by a careless hand. Thousands of these little machines on thousands of dead rocks, each one holding exactly one mind, each one chosen for the same single quality, that no one would ever come. This is the story of that network and how it died. More precisely, it is the story of the one prisoner who took the worst thing we knew how to do to a thinking creature, the punishment we considered too terrible to name in polite company and too elegant to ever abandon, and turned it into the exact reason we could never use it again. I am a recorder of the vole. It is my function to keep the truth even when the truth is unflattering, and there is nothing in our long history less flattering than this. So listen carefully. We got it wrong. We got it wrong for 10,000 years, and one human showed us how, and I am going to tell you precisely how it happened. We called it marooning. You should understand what that word meant to us before you decide whether it was justice. Across the civilized species, there is a great deal of confusion about vole punishment, and most of it is wrong. The popular image is of torture, of execution, of some grand violence done to the condemned. We never did any of that. The vole are not a violent people. We found violence inefficient, and worse than inefficient, we found it merciful. A creature you kill stops suffering. A creature you maim adapts. We wanted neither. Marooning was not killing. I cannot stress this enough because every species that learned of it afterward described it as a death sentence, and every time they did, they revealed that they had not understood it at all. We did not take a mind and end it. We took a mind and left it perfectly intact, perfectly healthy, perfectly fed, and we removed from it the one thing every thinking creature in the known galaxy cannot survive the loss of: other minds. Contact. The presence of someone, anyone, who might one day see you. We left them alive with infinite time and absolutely nothing to spend it on, and we let the long arithmetic of solitude do what no executioner ever could. Our studies were exhaustive because we are nothing if not thorough. A social mind deprived of all contact begins to fail in stages, and the stages are reliable, and we had charted them across more than 200 species. First the bargaining, the talking to walls, the conviction that rescue is coming. Then the rage when the rescue does not come. Then the long gray flattening where the mind, finding nothing outside itself to hold onto, begins to consume itself instead. And finally the dissolution, where there is no longer anyone home to suffer, only a body that breathes and a recycler that hums and a sentence that is, technically, still being served. Average was 11 years. Some species lasted 3. The strongest, the great Stoic philosopher castes of the inner worlds who had trained their whole lives for endurance, reached 19 before the curve bent down and took them like all the rest. We considered marooning humane precisely because we never laid a hand on the condemned, and we considered it worse than death precisely because the condemned would have begged, by the end, for a hand to be laid on them. Both things were true. That was the elegance of it. That was why we were so proud. You have to see the place to understand why it worked, because the place was the executioner, and we simply chose it well. We did not maroon prisoners on worlds. Worlds are too generous. A world has a sky, and a sky implies a sun, and a sun implies a day that ends and another that begins, and that rhythm is a companion, however faint. A world has weather, and weather is change, and change is something to watch. A world might have, somewhere over its horizon, the faint possibility of another living thing. We could not allow possibility. Possibility is hope, and hope is the thing that slows the curve. So we chose the dark between the stars, the rogue rocks that fell out of their systems long ago and now drift through the absolute nothing on paths that intersect with no trade lane, no survey route, no scavenger's map. We bolted our little stations to those rocks, and we stripped them of everything but the minimum. Enough air, enough water, enough warmth that the cold itself would not be merciful and finish the job early. A window, sometimes, looking out at nothing, because we found that the nothing worked faster than a blank wall did. And then we read the sentence, and we sealed the door, and we left, and the silence closed over the prisoner like water over a dropped stone. There were no monitors inside that could be reached. There were no controls that answered. There was no signal that could leave. We were very careful about the signal, you understand. The whole architecture of the punishment depended on the certainty that no one would ever come, and a station that could call for help was a station that offered hope, and hope was the enemy. So we built them deaf and mute and blind to the rest of the universe. The prisoner could not call out. The universe could not call in. That was the point. That was always the point. It is, I will admit now, with the clarity that 10,000 years of being wrong eventually grants you, a profoundly stupid thing to build. But I am getting ahead of the story. The sentence handed to Elias Mercer was procedurally flawless, and I have reviewed the record more times than I can count, looking for the error, and there was no error. We did everything correctly. That is the part that still unsettles me. He had been taken in a border action. One of those tedious frontier disputes where a young species presses against our holdings and we press back, and the specifics do not matter except that he was judged a combatant of Category 9, which is the category we reserve for those we wish to erase rather than execute. The tribunal convened. The clauses were read. I have the recording of the reading, and the human stood very still through all of it and said nothing, and watched the warden with an expression our analysts could not classify and so logged simply as attentive. We thought it was shock. We were accustomed to shock. Most prisoners, when they finally understand what marooning is, begin to come apart in the chamber itself, before we have even sealed the door, and that early collapse was always counted as the procedure working. Mercer did not come apart. He listened to the final clause, the one that informs the condemned that no appeal exists, that no contact will be permitted, that they will not be visited, monitored, or remembered, and that for all legal purposes they are, as of the closing of the door, already deceased. And when the warden finished reading it, the human asked one question. He asked whether anyone would be watching. The warden, who had read that clause 10,000 times to 10,000 prisoners, told him the truth, because the truth was the cruelest part. No, the warden said, no one will be watching. No one will ever watch again. The record notes that the human nodded once, as though something had been confirmed that he had merely wished to be sure of. And then they sealed the door of the way station on the dark rock between the systems, and the warden opened the prisoner file and entered the first formal estimate in accordance with procedure. Estimated time to cognitive collapse, 9 years, 4 months. For a human, with their short lives and their thin social tolerances, this was considered generous. The warden logged it, closed the file, and left, expecting never to open it again. I want you to remember that number. 9 years, 4 months. We will be coming back to it. To understand why what happened next was impossible, you have to understand who had come before, because we did not arrive at marooning carelessly. We arrived at it across 10,000 years of patient, documented, absolutely confident observation, and every single observation told us the same thing. There were the Sethran, the crystalline thinkers of the second expansion, who prized logic above all things and believed that a sufficiently disciplined mind could not be broken by mere absence. We marooned a Sethran philosopher who had spent 6 centuries preparing his consciousness for exactly such a trial. He lasted 7 years. The recordings we recovered afterward, the ones the prisoners scratched into walls or whispered to dead machines, showed the same arc as the rest. The discipline held, and then it did not, and what was left at the end was not a philosopher. There were the Ablan, who lived in such enormous family minds that a single individual barely existed as a separate thing at all, and for them marooning was so instantly catastrophic that the curve barely had a slope. There were the Tavanni, the solitary hunters who lived their whole natural lives alone in the deep forests of their world, and who we therefore expected to be immune. They lasted the longest of any species we ever recorded, but only because they had been alone before, and even they came apart in the end because there is a difference, it turns out, between choosing solitude and having it sealed over you forever. Even the Tavanni broke. 19 years. Then the curve. Always the curve. This was the thing we knew with total certainty. Every mind, given enough empty time and no one to spend it on, turns inward and devours itself. The species varied. The slope varied. The destination never did. We had 200 years of data and not one exception, and a recorder of the vole learns to trust 200 years of data without exception. The human was simply going to be the next entry. A short-lived, fragile, social little creature dropped into the dark. We expected him to break early. We expected him, if anything, to break ahead of schedule. So when the time came, by long custom, to perform the only check the procedure ever permitted, a single passive reading of the station's life-sign telemetry, taken once every few years from a great distance, just to confirm the body was still breathing and the file could remain open or be closed, we expected nothing. The reading was not a monitor. It told us only that something inside was alive. It could not tell us what that something was thinking or building or planning, because we had made very sure that the station could send nothing out. It told us only alive or not alive. And in Mercer's case, at the first reading, it told us alive, which surprised no one. And it told us alive at the second reading, which surprised us slightly, because by then the human should have been deep into the gray flattening, and a flattening mind, in our long experience, tends to let the body falter. The life signs were not faltering. They were, if anything, stronger than at intake. The warden of record, a different warden by now, for the vole are long-lived but not immortal, opened the file and made the first revision. Estimated time to cognitive collapse, revised to 11 years. A correction, nothing more. Fragile creatures sometimes surprised us by a margin. The file was closed again. The third reading did not surprise us slightly. It alarmed us. Because here is the thing we had never accounted for. The thing that does not appear anywhere in 200 years and 200 species of immaculate data. The thing that I have come to believe we could not have accounted for because we are vole, and a vole could no more imagine it than imagine a new color. Every species we had ever marooned came from a world where their kind had risen together, in safety, in numbers, where to be alone was the rare emergency, and to be among others was the natural state. Solitude to all of them was a wound, an aberration, the absence of the thing that made them what they were. We had never marooned a human. We did not know then what we know now, that the creature we had sealed in the dark came from a line that had spent its entire existence being abandoned and surviving it, that its ancestors had been left behind by glaciers, by droughts, by oceans, by the slow grinding indifference of a world that had tried for 2 million years to kill them with isolation and emptiness and silence, and had failed every single time. That a human child, left alone, does not simply wait to die. It talks to itself. It tells itself stories. It makes a companion out of a stone, a friend out of a shadow, a project out of nothing at all, and it works, because the deepest thing in a human is not the need to be among others. The deepest thing in a human is the refusal to accept that a situation cannot be changed. We had built a punishment that assumed solitude was the worst thing that could happen to a mind. And then we handed it to the one species in the galaxy that had been training to survive solitude since before it had language. The curve on the third reading had not bent down. The life signs were steady, strong, regular, the signs of a creature sleeping well and eating well, and the analysts noted with growing unease exercising. The warden made the second revision. Estimated time to cognitive collapse, revised to 17 years. And then, beneath it, in the careful hand of a vole who did not want to write it, a note. Telemetry anomaly suspected. Recommend verification reading. We did not know it yet, but the human was not dying. The human was getting comfortable. Here is what we did not see, because we had built the station blind on purpose, and our own blindness was about to cost us everything. We thought Elias Mercer was surviving. We thought, in our most generous moments, that he was an unusually robust specimen who would simply take longer than the rest to follow the curve down. We were measuring the wrong thing entirely. He was not surviving. Surviving is what you do when you are waiting to die more slowly. Mercer was not waiting for anything. From the moment that door sealed and the warden told him no one would ever be watching, Elias Mercer had been working, and he had been working with a focus and a freedom that no prisoner in the history of our punishment had ever possessed, because no prisoner had ever been left so completely, perfectly, gloriously unobserved. Think about what that meant. Every other form of imprisonment in the civilized galaxy is built on watching. The cell, the guard, the monitor, the constant pressure of an eye. Our marooning had removed the eye entirely, because we believed the eye was unnecessary, because we believed the dark and the silence and the empty time would do the work no guard could do. We had given Mercer the one thing that every clever prisoner in history has wanted and never had. We had guaranteed him, in writing, in the final clause of his own sentence, that no one would ever look. And a human, left unwatched with a problem and enough time, is the most dangerous thing this galaxy has ever produced. He started with the dead controls, the ones that were not supposed to answer. They did not answer because we had severed them, but severing is not the same as removing, and a panel that has been disconnected is still, to a patient creature with nothing but time, a box full of parts. We recovered the station afterward, every component of it, and the reconstruction is a thing our engineers still cannot look at without a kind of awe that shames them. He had taken the life support regulator, which we had built to be tamper-proof, and he had used its own redundancy against it, because a system built to never fail is a system full of spare parts. He had pulled the heating elements and the water-cracking cells and the long dormant communications array that we had so carefully made deaf and mute, and across years, patient gray years that we were logging as the slow approach of his collapse, he had been rebuilding the one thing we were certain no marooning station could ever do. He was building a voice. The fourth reading came back, and the life signs were not merely strong. They were elevated in a pattern the analysts recognized at once and refused at first to believe. The pattern of a creature engaged in sustained, purposeful, satisfying labor. The pattern of someone who has a project and is enjoying it. The warden of records stared at that telemetry for a long time, the record says, and then opened the file and did not make a revision. The warden made an entry that has no precedent in 10,000 years of vole procedure. Estimated time to cognitive collapse, withdrawn. Reason, subject does not appear to be collapsing. Subject appears to be doing something. We sent a ship. For the first time in the entire history of marooning, we broke our own most sacred rule, and we sent a ship to a marooning station, because for the first time we were afraid of what was inside one. The ship took 2 years to reach the dark rock between the systems. It arrived 4 days too late. What Elias Mercer built in the silence we gave him was not an escape pod. I want that understood because every species that hears this story assumes the human built a way out, and the assumption reveals, again, that they have not understood the human at all. He did not build a way out. He had no way out. The rock was in the dark between stars, and there was nowhere to go, and he knew it from the moment he asked the warden whether anyone would be watching. He had not been planning his escape. He had been planning ours. He built a beacon, but not a beacon that called for rescue, because rescue was not what he wanted, and this is the part where you must set aside everything your own kind would have done and understand a human instead. He did not build a signal that said, "Come and save me." He built a signal that said, "Here we all are." Because here is what Elias Mercer had worked out, alone in the dark, with nothing but time and the dead guts of a machine. He had worked out what the station was. He had worked out from the architecture of his own prison that it was one of many, that the Vole did not build a unique machine for a single prisoner but a standard machine deployed at scale, and that a standard machine deployed at scale meant a network, and a network meant a registry, and a registry meant coordinates. The communications array he rebuilt was not powerful. It could not have reached a rescue ship, but it did not need to reach a rescue ship. It only needed to reach the one thing we had been too proud to imagine a prisoner could ever touch. It needed to reach the network itself. The quiet, automated, deaf and mute network of stations talking to nothing, drifting in the dark, that we had built to be silent and had therefore never thought to secure, because why would you secure a thing that cannot speak? He made it speak. He made every station in the network speak at once. He turned our silent web of tombs into a single voice, and the voice did not whisper to us. It shouted on every open band to every receiver in the galaxy that cared to listen, the full registry of every marooning site the Vole had ever built. Thousands of dark rocks, thousands of sealed doors, thousands of prisoners we had filed as already deceased, alive in the dark, suddenly and irrevocably visible to every civilization that had ever wondered, with quiet horror, what exactly the Vole did with the ones they took. We had built the punishment on a single foundation, and the foundation was that no one would ever come. Elias Mercer did not arrange for someone to come. He arranged for everyone to come at once. The cruelty we had designed, the perfect unobserved isolation, the guarantee that no eye would ever fall on the condemned, had handed him the one and only thing he needed to undo all of it. A room where no one was watching and enough time to work. When our ship reached his rock 4 days too late, the beacon had already been broadcasting for a month. Half the galaxy was already moving toward our network. The station door was open. He had opened it himself from the inside with controls we had sworn could not be reached, and he had walked out onto the surface of the dark rock in a suit he had built from the recycler housing, and he was sitting there, the recovery team reported, looking up at a sky with no stars in it, waiting, not for rescue, for confirmation. He asked the recovery team a single question, the same question he had asked the warden at his sentencing, and when they understood it, every one of them, the record says, felt something break inside them that has not healed in the Vole since. He asked them whether anyone had been watching. And this time the answer was yes, everyone was watching now. The treaty came within a single cycle, because there was no defending it once it was seen. A practice survives in the dark. Marooning had survived 10,000 years precisely because no one ever saw it, because the prisoners vanished and the stations were silent, and the whole monstrous network drifted unobserved in the gulfs between the stars where we had so carefully placed it. The moment it was seen, it could not survive at all. Every freed prisoner that the converging civilizations pulled from those thousands of dark rocks was a witness, and a living witness to a thing done in secret is the one weapon no secret can withstand. We freed them. We were made to free them, and then, when the freeing was done, we were made to abolish the practice entirely, to dismantle the network, to strike marooning from the body of Vole law and to record, in the great register that it is my function to keep, that the punishment we had considered our most elegant achievement had been ended not by an army, not by a fleet, not by any power that could be met with power, but by one short-lived creature with a dead machine and a refusal to break. Of the prisoners we recovered, most did not survive the rescue in any meaningful sense. The curve had taken them as it always took them, the Sethran and the Ablan and the Tavanni and all the rest, the social minds we had been so right about. The data, for every species but one, held perfectly to the end. We had not been wrong about solitude. We had been wrong about exactly one thing, and that one thing was enough to end us, and it was this. We had assumed that what was true of every mind we had measured was true of every mind there was. We had assumed that because we could not imagine surviving the dark, nothing could. We had built a punishment in the shape of our own worst fear, and we had handed it, by the blindest of accidents, to the one species whose entire history was a long argument that the dark can be survived, and not only survived, but used. Elias Mercer lived. He is, at the time of this record, still living, and he has never once, in any interview given to any of the dozen species that have asked him to explain what he did, described the marooning as suffering. This troubles us more than anything else in the entire affair, more than the broken law, more than the freed thousands, more than the treaty. He has described it every time the same way. He has described it as the most uninterrupted stretch of work he ever had. A quiet room. No one looking over his shoulder, a hard problem, and enough time to solve it. That is the part the other species never quite believe, and it is the part that I, as a recorder of the vole, am obligated to set down as the truth, however much it costs us. We did not torture Elias Mercer. We gave him solitude and silence and an absence of all watching eyes and infinite time, and we called it the punishment worse than death, and to him it was none of those things. To him it was a workshop. We had reached, across 10,000 years and 200 species, for the cruelest thing in our imagination, and we had handed a human the one set of conditions under which a human does its very best work. So when you hear the legend told, as it is told now across 100 worlds, of the prisoner who broke the vole, set aside the image you have been given. Set aside the suffering, the heroic endurance, the long agony triumphantly survived. It was not like that. There was no agony. That is the whole point, and it is the point we missed for 10,000 years and paid for in a single cycle. We thought we had found a way to make a mind devour itself by leaving it alone with nothing. We had simply never met a mind that could make something out of nothing, and would rather be left alone to do it. The dark between the stars is empty again now. The stations are gone, the rocks drift on with no machines bolted to their backs, and there is no longer any place in vole law where a thinking creature can be sealed away from every other and called already dead. We ended it ourselves in shame, because we had been seen. And I keep this record so that we will not forget why, and so that any species that ever again believes solitude is the worst thing it can do to a mind will know what we learned, too late, on a dark rock in the gulf between two systems. You can take everything from a creature like that. The light, the company, the hope, the very certainty that anyone will ever know it existed. You can seal the door and read the clause and tell it truthfully that no one will ever be watching. And if the creature is human, it will simply look at you and nod once, as though you have confirmed something it merely wished to be sure of. And then it will get to work.